we decided, with a crisis of leadership, to go with our cost of living crisis, a drought crisis, an energy crisis, and every other crisis. We need a leader. We need a guy who's got some ideas, and I'm delighted to be joined by Phones for You founder and billionaire British business luminary. You try saying that. John Caudwell, how are you, my friend?
Well, much better after that introduction, Jeremy. Thank you.
John, we know each other well. We have a heat wave. We have a cost of living crisis. We have the NHS on its knees. The Parliament's out of action. Our leaders are nowhere to be seen. You founded one of the most successful businesses this country has ever seen. Are you impressed by the politicians' work ethic right now?
Well, I'm not impressed by the politicians generally and the performance of the last 2 years, but often the performance is lacking, regardless of which party's in and regardless of which period you're talking about. You know, there was so much could have been done in the last 2.5 years by the Conservative government, and it hasn't been done. And that is such a disastrous loss to society. So, no, I'm not particularly happy at all, Jeremy.
You famously donated £500,000 to the Tories before the last election, one of their chief donors. Did you expect more in return? Would you be doing it again? Where are you at with that?
Well, it was a one-off donation, and it was really to help keep Corbyn and McDonnell out. And am I happy with that? Yes, absolutely, because I think they would have been a fiasco for Britain. Having said which, the combination of Brexit, Ukraine war, energy crisis, drought crisis, we're not in a very good place, are we? And so, but there's so much more could have been done by an ambitious government.
I find myself frustrated. I don't know if you share that frustration. You know, Johnson got that mandate. Yeah, I mean, we'd be the same. And it seems to have disappeared with this minutiae of ridiculous decisions. You were very critical of Rishi Sunak's furlough scheme, I remember at the time. You said it was too dangerous and it would fuel inflation. There we go, John Caudwell right, Rishi Sunak wrong. Is he to blame? And where do you stand on this party leadership campaign, John?
Well, absolutely is to blame. I mean, only for part of it, of course, because the Ukraine situation and the energy crisis is a big part of it as well. But, you know, Rishi could have done so much more. I went out 2.5 years ago, immediately the pandemic struck, and said nobody should be substantially worse off as a result of the pandemic. Well, unfortunately, it made people better off as a result of the pandemic. And of course, there was then a destocking of the entire supply chain throughout the world. So as soon as people then came back to the market post-pandemic, there was a huge desire and demand for goods that had not been produced over the previous 2 years. And that really has stoked inflation. But also, in addition, he neglected 3 or 4 million, I don't know how many of the 3 or 4 million that are so-called forgotten or so-called excluded, but he certainly neglected some of them and made them substantially worse off. So he got a lot of things wrong. And I am, of course, naturally quite critical of that, because being very patriotic for Britain, I want to see Britain prosper and succeed. I don't want governments making big mistakes that are avoidable.
One of the things that just causes so much anger amongst our viewers and our listeners is every week there seems to be another story, John, about an energy firm with billions of pounds worth of profits and, you know, bills. I think from this year, the average electricity, £12.77, it's £4,200 by next January. And I cannot over-exaggerate this enough. There will be millions of people in this country who cannot pay their bills. Out of the blue today, we hear that energy bosses met with the government. Boris turned up. Windfall taxes were ruled out. Apparently the meeting ended with no agreement. As a businessman, a successful businessman, unless I'm missing the point, you need to keep your customers happy. Do you not think that the government should put pressure on these energy firms to give some of those ridiculously large profits back to the very people, the consumers, that have them where they are?
I do, absolutely. But there is a very, very difficult dilemma here, because I was a great advocate of windfall taxes on those companies during the pandemic that benefited enormously out of the fact that all the shops were shut and everybody was driven online. I would also be an advocate of taking some of the energy companies' profits off them as well. But, and this is a really big but, Britain has to be seen to be a friendly country towards businesses that are coming into our country. Because if we are seen to just keep taking money from people who have windfall profits, it'll make us much less desirable to be invested upon. So I don't actually have the answer for that, but I do think there is a cause for windfall taxes. I do think they could be implemented as a one-off, as long as a guarantee was given then that that same type of tax wouldn't occur in the future years, maybe a decade or so, because you've got to give people confidence that they can build a business in Britain without suddenly losing profitability. But at the same time, they've made a fortune.
I get that. One final question, and it is always a pleasure to pick the brains of somebody. I mean, you should be Prime Minister tomorrow because you'd turn up. You're one of the biggest single taxpayers in this country. I want you, because you are a self-made man, I want you to address the men and women of this country watching Talk right now and saying, he's a billionaire, I'm being straight, Kyle's on the telly, I am struggling, I'm a jam, just about managing, I've got 2 kids, I literally have got a few quid left at the end of the week when I've paid this, that and the other. I'm not getting any handouts, I'm not getting anything, I see this every single day, energy, petrol, food. I'm really at the end of my tether. What message, John Caudwell, would you give? And this is the sort of message that the government should give. What would you say?
Well, I think the government really do have to help the people at the very bottom of the food chain and help them substantially. We should potentially be looking at minimum wages in this country and whether to implement a new minimum wage. But certainly, as an emergency measure, we should be helping out dramatically with the energy crisis. But I think we will do that. But we shouldn't be giving it to everybody because a lot of people can afford it and it is a real cost. So we should be giving it to those people that really cannot afford to pay their way and are really going to struggle. And I think the government will do that. At least I really hope so.
John Caudwell, that's what I call real leadership. They're talking and giving practical advice. We really appreciate you joining us tonight. Thank you very much indeed. Really appreciate that. Where are our politicians? Nowhere to be seen. John Caudwell on the television saying, this is what I do.